Losers queue is an idea that has started to pick up traction from pro players and streamers. The common general idea of losers queue is that these players are sometimes put into games that they have a higher chance of losing than winning, and in many cases are put into seemingly completely unwinnable games. There are many theories about why this is the case, and up until now it has mostly been a conspiracy theory. In this video I'm going to show you real proof from a scientific paper that losers queue is a real thing, and why companies do it. Quickly, before I start, I make lots of interesting videos where I find new and unique things about games, so subscribe if you want to see more. Let's get into it. In 2017, a scientific paper was written in collaboration between multiple US universities and multiple EA employees. It is named EOMM, an Engagement Optimized Matchmaking Framework, and it discusses a matchmaking system designed by EA that closely matches the winners and losers queue idea. The theory that this paper begins with is that matchmaking systems that are based purely on matching players that are even skill are less engaging than a system which specifically chooses when you will win and when you will lose. The paper uses this idea and tests it with a real-life example. The paper doesn't specifically name the game that the data is from, but mentions that it is from a 1v1 game made by EA, so we could assume that it's a game like FIFA, Madden, or any other 1v1 sports title, as these are the only 1v1 games that EA makes. This data is the most important part of the study and shows exactly why a company not only would do a losers queue, but should do a losers queue in their game. This table shows the churn risk of gamers after having specific outcomes in their last games. The churn risk is described as the ratio of the players who stopped playing within a period of time after a match, specifically 7 days for this example. So this is actual players completely quitting the game after receiving a certain result in their past few games. This table shows that the highest churn risk is a record of 3 losses in a row, which is unsurprising, as if you aren't winning at all, then you probably aren't having any fun. And again, the second highest churn risk is ending the day with a loss, even if your other games were win-win. These are normal gaming stats and not specifically about the losers queue system, but are quite interesting. However, when we look at the other data, we see that even a win-win-win as a record is not the most reliable way to keep players playing your game, and this is where the real juicy stuff starts. The lowest churn risk, lowest rates that people will quit your game, is when the record is closer to a 50-50 of wins and losses, with draws also thrown in some cases. Again, the fact that there are draws potentially shows that it can be a sports game, as draws aren't common in most competitive games, so it could be something like FIFA, where it's football and you could have even goals. So basically what this table is saying is that the most important factor for player satisfaction is having less success to begin with and ending the day with a positive result. So for example, the loss-loss-win rate is 2.6 to 2.7% churn, even less than 3 wins in a row, which shows that players do enjoy overcoming odds and also mostly remember the most recent results they have had. If you're ending the day of playing on this high of a win, you won't care as much about the previous losses. Same way that if you end the day on a loss, you may be mostly caught up in that loss, rather than thinking about your past wins. So how does this specifically become a losers queue? We have pretty much no information about how most matchmaking actually works, with companies basing it on hidden MMR values, and only giving players a public rank so they can assume they're getting fair matches. So in this case, there's pretty much no reason for a company to provide fair matchmaking, rather than a system that maximizes engagement, as they don't actually have to tell anyone they're doing it. Ultimately, a game like League of Legends' main aim is to make money, and the main way this happens is to keep people interested in their game, playing the game, so they'll feel invested and willing to spend money on things like skins or champions, so they can expand their enjoyment of the game. If players are not kept playing the game, then they won't spend any money. So you can see why a matchmaking system that prioritizes user attention will increase the likelihood of higher profit. Again, there's no way to prove this is happening without getting actual word from the developers or studying a huge amount of statistics from players to see if a specific game has these results. However, we can use League of Legends as an example and say, what if it is true and losers queue is real? Well, firstly, you would look at the risk-reward for Riot to do this in their game. The rewards, as we know, are very high, probably more than we can imagine, with the game having $1.5 billion revenue in 2019. The 3% difference in churn rate would actually be $45 million. So if they're keeping this churn rate low, they are actually making an extra $45 million. This is a very specific number and could be higher or lower, and also their churn rate could be different to the EA games, but it can show that they will be making more money if they can keep this churn rate low, and one way of doing this is the engagement-based matchmaking. And furthermore, League is a ranked-based game, so wins and losses may be even more important to players than whatever game EA used for their data. The risks of the system are low, as Riot never has to say how their system exactly works, and doesn't even really talk about MMR publicly, preferring the more user-friendly rank system with its nice UI that they've designed to make you feel better about your rank and make you excited to climb. It's clearly a more motivating system than just a number, like an MMR system would be. This kind of use of a public-facing system with a private-facing system for matchmaking is the exact kind of thing that shows an engagement-based matchmaking system is possible, and that companies do hide information from players. One specific place that is often talked about as being harder to win than others is promotion series in League of Legends. These are the games that judge whether you're worth progressing to a new tier or if you're not good enough yet, and give you a new badge on your profile showing your progression. These are always going to be hard and do require basically a 66% win rate in 3-game series or a 60% win rate in 5-game series to get promoted. This required win rate is likely the source of failed promos, but it has become a slightly common thought in League that you're matched with worse players as soon as you start getting into these promo series, as a way for Riot to stop you from progressing and increase your grind so you play more. Personally, I think you could put this down to increased pressure, so you may not be performing optimally in this series, mixed with being hyper-aware of your teammates in the promos, as you may be looking for proof that it is a fixed game. But you could also look at this as the prime games for Riot to implement a different matchmaking system. These games are stopping points that you are required to complete to progress to the next rank. What do you think happens when someone is an average silver player and finally reaches gold for the season rewards? Yeah, he's stopped playing, as he's completed his goal and gotten the rewards. So then this player would be churned and not spending any money on the game. If instead Riot prolonged this process by making him lose a few promo series on purpose, then finally winning after trying for months, you can imagine that the player would be very proud of the achievement and overcoming the odds, so may not want to stop playing. This is the same as in the EA study, where players that have a record of loss-loss-win have the lowest churn rate. If you think of the loss-loss-win as a promo series rather than individual games, then you can see how this idea holds up in League. My personal opinion is that we cannot know if companies are doing things like this unless they tell us, or someone does a statistical study to find out. The point of this video is to show that losers queue is a real thing that companies have invented, and it is very possible that companies like Riot are using it in their games to maximize engagement while keeping it a secret. It may even be the case that the system only kicks in for promo series, or when the game thinks you're at risk of quitting. It also makes me wonder what other types of matchmaking companies use to maximize other metrics. For example, this EA idea maximizes player spending by maximizing engagement. But you could also have a system that maximizes player spending by matching them with good players that use specific expensive skins and are also higher skilled than the player, so that then those lower skilled players would be driven to purchasing the skins. Or another example would be rewarding players for spending money on the game by increasing their odds of winning directly after buying a new skin. This would not even need to be a huge increase, and could even fall into the category of inconclusive data, so people couldn't even figure out it was happening, where one team is only getting a 1 to 2% increased odds. But then if you compare that to the overall millions of matches, this would lead to players that bought skins winning more games than players that didn't. Again, these are just ideas of what companies could be doing, and there's no proof of specific companies using these specific matchmaking systems, other than the EA one, which they have actually clearly tested on their games. Games designers' whole job is to create games that make players feel a specific way, whether that is making a level that you find interesting, making a skin that makes players feel more powerful, or even designing a new matchmaking system that makes players feel most satisfied. Overall, if you always felt good about your time spent in a gaming session at the end, wouldn't it be worth it? Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like the video if you learnt something new, and make sure to subscribe if you want to see more videos like this.